Okay, good morning to our final session. So the semester began and it is at an end in quick time. You all remember we're just at week 1 and week 2, and we know are just a few weeks before exams. So at least for this one, it's 15, so you got just about 3 weeks and a few days before exams, but I'm sure your exams will be starting before that. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go right back to the beginning and come through some of the critical areas that you really need to know in order to be able to do well in your exam. And so how we're going to do it interactive, we're going to be touching on topics. I'm going to be posing some questions to you, and you can use this as an opportunity to test your knowledge and to test your understanding of areas. So feel free at any point, if there's anything you need a little more clarity on, that you can just indicate to me that you need some clarity. At any point, you can just stop me and we can have a dialogue. So it's more an interactive in the review. I really ask for your full participation as we wrap up this session. So one of the fundamental things that you need to know for the course is this basic concept of the environment of business. So by now, all students should know all the factors in the external environment, the general environment, which is the PESEL, and you should know all of the factors in the internal environment, what makes up the internal environment, and which would help you to do your SWOT. Right? So we know PESEL, everybody would know PESEL, what it means, political, legal, etc., etc. And we also would know the competitive environment, so people should know in 5 forces what is involved in 5 forces analysis and the reasons why you do 5 forces. Anybody can tell me why you do the 5 forces analysis? Why do you do 5 forces analysis? Yes. Tough. Right, you're trying to look at the factors, but what do you want to do when you look at these factors in the competitive environment? What are you trying to do? Doing the 5 forces analysis. Right. You're trying to look at the bargaining power of the suppliers. You're trying to determine who has the bargaining power, whether the suppliers or the buyers would have bargaining power. You're trying to look at what else you're trying to determine. Right. And why is it important to determine the rivalry among competing firms? Why is that important? Sorry? For pricing, right. But why pricing? Why it eventually would lead to pricing? What factors play out when the rivalry is intense? Sorry? Right. So when the rivalry is intense, customers will have bargaining power because right, they have choices. Not just saturated, it's because they have choices. It is saturated with a whole set of players, but the customers will have choices, right? So these fundamental concepts, you wouldn't get a question in the exam asking you what is 5 forces, but you need to know the concepts, the importance of the bargaining power of the supplier. You would need to know the importance of the bargaining power of the buyer, the importance of this concept of rivalry among competing firms. The more intense the rivalry, the more it benefits the customers because they have choices. The less intense the rivalry suggests that the less intense the rivalry suggests there is, right, it tending towards some kind of monopolistic situation where there are very few players who can then control the market, right? So you need to know those concepts. So why should a company pay attention to substitute products? Why should a company pay attention to substitute products? Right up front, why should a company pay attention to substitute products? What do they do? Louder. Right, it provides the customer with options, and once their options mean the customer will have more choices. So your product could be the authentic one, but if I have a substitute, it will work just as well for me. Right? So people have no problem with substitutes. Right? So SWOT, basic, again, SWOT is a basic concept you should know. We don't test you at this stage on a SWOT analysis, but you need to know the importance. Why? So what is it? Why is a SWOT necessary? What kind of tools we have utilized in this course require a SWOT analysis? Sorry? What tools we discuss in this class require a SWOT analysis? The IFE and the EFE require, what else? There's another one. Which other one? Right, the CPM also requires you to do a SWOT analysis. So RBV, these are two theoretical or philosophical concepts informing strategy. And now I should be able to ask any student, what is the RBV all about in summary? Excellent. Yeah. She said the internal factors are more important than the external in terms of company gaining a competitive advantage. And we know there are some key characteristics of the RBV that everybody should know at this point. And those key characteristics are, must be rare, not easily substituted, and not easily imitated. And once you have that, it means you have a better chance of gaining this competitive advantage. And when you link that to human resources, you have a very powerful combination. We'll touch on that a little later. And the IO then basically says the opposite, the external resources. So which notice strategist or strategy researcher is an IO proponent? Which noted strategist or strategic researcher, strategic management researcher is a noted IO? Right, Michael Porter. All of his work is grounded in the industrial and organizational approach to strategy, that he focuses a lot on the external forces, the general, the economic, the political, technological, the competitors out there. He's focused on competitors, right, which differs from the RBV, even though the IO is much more popular. So again, these two concepts, you really need to know these concepts very well at this stage. Everybody should know a vision and a mission. How does a vision differ from a mission? Right here, Mike. Which one is? Vision is? Sorry? Which is the vision? Where you want to be? Where you want to be, where, when, and how. Next to him, what is the vision versus mission? Yes, sir. How does the vision differ from a mission? Anybody, you should all know this by well. Vision differ from a mission, how? Right. Right. So the vision heads to the future, what you want to be in the future, and the mission is about what you will do in order to achieve this future vision. Right? So these are philosophical concepts you need to know. And in any exam on strategy, at some point, in some question, you're going to have to refer to them because they establish the goals and the objectives for the company. And the business model, this is a concept, again, fundamental concept of a business model. It's core in strategy. So we know the business model is made up right up front here, Mr. Apple. A business model, what is the business model all about? Yes? Business model is about right. The organizational strategy should make how it want to make its money, and how is it made up? What is it made up of, Justin? How you manage your costs. Sorry? Right. How you're going to generate your revenues, how you're going to manage costs, in order to make your profit. So we know once you're talking about a business model, about managing costs and revenues, it's going to be linked to what kind of things then? Value chain is going to be linked to the value chain. What else is going to be linked to? Strategic cost analysis, financial management. So that's the elements of your business model. Issue of the value proposition. What propositions are you making to your customers? So everybody should understand the basic concept of this business model and its relationship to other components of strategy. As I said, how you plan to make your money. So can somebody give me an example of a traditional business model versus a modern business model? Quickly, somebody who hasn't spoken yet. My friends in the orange. The orange will give me the traditional, the first orange, and the second orange, the modern. Example of a traditional business model first. A practical one. Sorry? Is it brick and click? Traditional business model. Which is traditional business model? It's not brick. Bricks and mortar. Y'all forget it? So give me a practical example of bricks and mortar. S.Y. Adams. Right, going into the bank and to get your money withdrawn and depositing money physically, that's bricks and mortar. You go to a place. Give me an example of a modern business model. You click. Right, eBay, e-commerce, Amazon. Give me an example of brick and click. And what's the example? How do they operate? Give me the example of what is brick, what is click. Right, you can walk into the store and purchase your goods, or you could actually go online and you can purchase stuff, and in many cases the things are delivered to you. Actually, you get the things delivered. So you really should understand how these two models differ between the brick and click, or the three models actually: the bricks and mortar, the brick and click, which is options, and the pure click businesses. So why do companies move towards the more modern business models of click or brick and click? Sorry? There. But why do they move towards that? Main reason. Right, less cost, right. They're trying to manage costs and trying to reduce costs by using technology. What are some of the main things that they will be reducing in the organization or eliminating the organization when you move to click? The staff. One of the main things would be you don't need as much staff. So if you look at the commercial banks, years ago you used to have 6 and 7 tellers lined up. Now they're reducing it and discouraging you from coming to the bank. In fact, you have to pay a charge to transact business, right? So they just have maybe 2 tellers, maybe 3 sometimes. But generally, you can go to your ATMs, go online and pay your bills. And most banks, if not all, now you can go online and pay bills and transfer money, right, from one account to the other account. So please learn that concept of a business model. If at this point you're struggling with business model, you are partly struggling. EFE, IFE, CPM. Right? We dealt with these concepts of the IFE, which is driven by the strengths and weaknesses, and the EFE driven by the opportunities and the threats, and the CPM, which is the competitive profile matrix. And we know the CPM, what is the CPM made up of? Right, key success factors or critical success factors. Excellent. What other things would you find in a CPM? The weights, rated score, and the ratings. Why do you allocate weights? Why do you allocate weights to a CPM matrix? What's the reason for having weights? It tells you about importance, and why is identifying importance so important? Sorry? Where to put your focus on, and why would you focus on these ones? What is it telling you?
What you need to capitalize on.
Right. It tells you what the company really needs to capitalize on. It's one of the most critical things that could impact on your business. Right? So what's the major difference between weights for a CPM and the weights for an EFE and IFE? What are the main differences between the weights in the IFE and IFE and the weights that you get in the CPM? Sorry, Miss, I can't hear you. Right, correct. The CPM looks at weights for the industry, whereas the weights for the IFE and EFE are for the individual business. I repeat, the CPM has industry rates. And it has industry rates because, excellent, because it compares other top companies within a particular sector. Excellent. It makes comparisons of other top companies. Right? So the CPM can also be aligned to the five forces, where you're looking at the intense rivalry among competing firms and how strong the rivalry is. So the CPM helps a company, if it's looking to develop its strategies, to identify the types of strategies that might be most important for it. And how can a CPM help a company considering horizontal integration? How can the CPM help a company considering horizontal integration? Right, she's given an example. The company, you might focus, if they're the critical success factor of market share, you can look for the company that maybe has the biggest market share, that might be doing not so well in other areas, and you can make a decision, well, look, your market share is not as big. Let's see if I can engage in taking over this company or engaging in some kind of merger that we both can benefit. So what are some of the other benefits you can get from horizontal integration? What are some of the other benefits you can get from horizontal integration? Right here. Right, share of knowledge, share of resources. What kind of knowledge do you mainly want? Right, why do you want tacit knowledge? Because you can get the distinctive competencies. Excellent. And why do you want to get these distinctive competencies? Because when you have these distinctive competencies, you can gain a competitive advantage. So now give me a theoretical perspective that can support the argument that the distinctive competencies can give you a competitive advantage. Give me a theoretical argument that can support your argument that distinctive competency would give you a competitive advantage. The resource-based view, why? Correct. So when you have a distinctive competence, in itself says your competitors just can't come and look at what you're doing and repeat it. They can't imitate it easily. They can't substitute it easily. Right? So this concept of the RBV can be used in different areas to justify and argue why a company might have an advantage over others, a competitive advantage, because what you do is unique, especially when it relates to your internal resources, your human resources. This table is dirty. Excellent, excellent. So that's the RBV, and we linked it to a whole set of different other concepts you would realize, and we went from CPM linking into RBV. So you're correct. So with the key thing we said, folks, if you look at a CPM matrix, one of the first things you do in analyzing a matrix, you focus on the weights, because it tells you importance, and importance would suggest that the company, these are the things that are most critical to your competitiveness and to your competitive advantage. And then financial ratio analysis, again, if you're an accounting student, once there's a question like this, is an easy question, right? So financial ratios, categories, you determine profitability, liquidity, growth rates. You're just looking at growth rates, and as I said, just corrected last time that in the tables that we normally bring, the first section generally deal with growth rates, and not necessarily profitability. So we'll be looking at the rate of growth in revenue, or the rate of growth of net income, or the rate of growth in sales, which is different to actually measuring your net profit, right? So you just look at the categories. As I said, what we are looking for is not that you can calculate a right percentage or a right number. When you're looking at financial ratio analysis, we're looking at your understanding of what liquidity is about. If you understand profitability, changes in profitability, the difference between a gross profit margin and a net profit margin. Is the company doing better than the industry, right? Are the margins wide? Are the margins narrow? Is there a big difference between the current ratio and the quick ratio? If it is big, if it is small, how does it compare with the industry, right? It's just those very simple things that we look at. So financial ratio analysis, once you've spent some time on it, is not a difficult area. So are there any questions anybody has on financial ratio analysis? Any questions, any comments, anything you wanted me to respond to? Yes? The price earnings ratio? Right. Somebody, well, other than we'll explain it, no, you can just go and look for Investopedia. And Investopedia has some pretty nice, very simple explanations of it. What's the price earnings ratio all about? What do you use it for? Who are the accounting students here? Price earnings ratio? Short girl, you know accounting? You said that with emphasis. Who else is accounting students? Put your hands up, let me see. Sorry, who is that? Where is she? Where? Where is she? What's the price earnings ratio? Right, to put it in a very simple thing, the price earnings ratio looks at the company share value, but in the sense of the attractiveness of a company to investors mainly, right? So earnings per share would be related to stockholders, average man or woman who would buy shares and expect at the end of the year, if the company achieves its profits targets, they declare dividends, and if they declare 5%, of 5 cents on every dollar, and you got 10,000 shares or 20,000 shares or 1,000 shares, you will get your payment once dividends are declared. But the price earnings ratio is about the attractiveness of a company to investors in the future, right? So when the video that we showed will show you whether the price earnings ratio is high or low. What did the video say that an investor might be attracted to? Price earnings ratio that is high or one that is low? Remember? Right. So what the investor would do, the investor is going to purchase the shares at this point. So the value might not seem to be given the returns big at this point, but they project that based on the ratio that is calculated for price earnings, the big investors, and I say these are really commercial investors, people who want to invest millions, they anticipate that I can invest in the company now and buy shares that in the next 10 to 15 years, the kind of returns I get are going to be of greater value. The multiplier effect would come into being, to put it in very simple terms. But if an investor, there's the attractiveness of a company's shares to investors, right? So the difference between the earnings per share and the price earnings, the earnings per share will tell you how much dividends will be paid at the end of a particular reporting year. The price earnings ratio tells the investor if this is an attractive investment to make, know that you can get your future benefits, right? You can get benefits in the future. Any other questions on financial ratio? Any other questions? Maybe what I can do in the break, I can just pull up that video and show that video on the price earnings ratio. All right, value chain analysis again, folks. No student should ever go in an exam strategy and not know value chain, because as far as I see it, a value chain analysis is integrated into nearly every area of strategy, right? So I would advise you don't go in the exam assuming I don't have to know or learn value chain, right? It is one of those all-encompassing concepts that would likely embrace a number of other questions. So you really need to know value chain analysis exceptionally well. So we know the purpose of value chain analysis. This purpose right in the back here. Purpose of value chain analysis. Yes, you sir. Yes. It's just looking at costs. Sorry? That the right, so we'll get to that shortly. So you're looking at how you manage your overall costs within the organization. Right? That's value chain analysis. How is the value chain analysis structured? Two ladies here. One of you, yes. How is it structured? Well, we're getting there yet. You have primary value chain and you have secondary. And next to you, what is in the primary value chain? You have inbound logistics, outbound logistics. What else? Operations, and then marketing, after sales service. And in the secondary value chain, you will then find research and development, administration, HR, accounting, technology, etc., etc. So, where would you find fixed, or where are you more likely to find fixed costs? And then you find your variable costs in your operations. So, right, you mentioned earlier you're looking at unit. So when you look at cost unit by unit, it is called strategic cost analysis. And there's some other key concepts that must be mentioned when you're looking at value chain analysis. After you do your strategic cost analysis, you then look to identify your cost drivers, and then your cost advantages and your cost disadvantages. So as I said, the unique thing about value chain analysis is that when you now start, it actually links in to all the concepts of competitiveness and competitive strategies. So when you look at the inbound logistics, it draws a link to your sources of supply. And as the student told me, this whole concept of logistics and logistics management, which is how you're purchasing different supplies. So remember, a company does not purchase one supply. A company is purchasing multiple supplies, from pens to pencils to tables to chairs to big raw materials for production. So supplies is a very wide range of things. So when you look at inbound logistics, what are you trying to identify at inbound logistics? What is the main thing when you do analysis of inbound logistics? You're trying to look at supply costs, and we know then when you're looking at supply costs, you're looking at sources of supply, and it relates then to what tools will be relevant there to help you do that analysis. Right, Porter's 5 forces, we call Porter's, will help you to determine whether the bargaining power of the supplier is high or whether it is low. And then once you suppose you identify the bargaining power of the supplier is low, what do you do? Hear what they said? I said if you find out the bargaining power of the supplier is low, will you backward integrate? No, what do you do? So what do you do? Smile and that's what you're doing. It's not you're trying to push down the supplier price. You're trying to tell the suppliers, oh, listen, if you want me to buy from you, you got to give me 10%. You got to give me 15%. If not, I'm going to the other competitor. So you can negotiate and push prices down in order to have your costs further reduced. But if the bargaining power of the supplier is high, what do? You can consider then, is it feasible for me to buy out this supplier that I can take control of supply sources, right? So you see you're linking to both 5 forces. You're linking then to a particular integration strategy, which is backward integration, right? So the point I'm making here, folks, even if you look at competitive strategies, it can have to relate to value chain. And if you look at value chain, it can still have to be related to integration strategies and 5 forces. So you really can't get away, right, from spotting. Sorry, you can't get away and try to spot. In that sense, you're really setting it yourself for trouble. And if a company now looks at its outbound logistics and it realizes that when it is having some difficulties in getting, when it looks at its inventory turnover, what does the inventory turnover tell you, lady in green? I have looked at my inventory turnover ratio, and when I looked at it in comparison to the other competitors, I am not doing as well. So what does the inventory turnover tell me? Inventory turnover ratio. Yes, go ahead. Right, it's telling me how fast my inventory is moving. And why is that important? If I convert my inventory turnover ratio to days, what does it tell me? Why is that important to convert it to days? No, not profitable. Why is it important to convert it to days? Huh? Sorry? Right, but why is it important to turn a number to days for purpose of analysis? Sorry? Right, so for purpose of practical analysis, looking at a ratio is not as advantageous as looking at days. In other words, it takes me 40 days to turn over my inventory rate. It takes the competitors 30 days. Who's better off? The competitors. It's taking me 40 days. You see, so when you look at a ratio, it is not as good as looking at days. So you convert to days. So if my ratio is not as good as the others, it tells me that I am not moving my inventory as quickly. And what are the implications of not moving my inventory as quickly as my competitors? Sorry? Less revenue generated. What else? Obsolescence and spoilage, storage costs, other costs, security costs. So it's not only the issue of declining revenues, I'm not getting my sales out, it is also impacting on other costs. So when we are talking about that then, right? What other ratio could be impacted by having all of the stock not moving as it should? What other ratio or ratios I might want to consider? Sorry? Stop whispering and tell me. What other ratios I might need to consider if my stock is not selling as much as I want? Why the current ratio? Right. So it's not only the current ratio though, it's also your quick ratio, because it is going to impact on my quick ratio more so that when I take out the inventory, you understand? So both the quick and current ratios will be impacted. So your competitors financially would look better than you as a simple result of the and look where we came from: outbound logistics, getting your stock out, the sales and marketing function, distribution, and we're linking it then to ratios, inventory turnover ratio. So if the company realizes it's being disadvantaged, it can make a decision to forward integrate. Because I'm having distribution problems, I take control of my sources of distribution. So I'm saying, even though we're talking about value chain analysis, we're still linking in to strategies, and we're still linking into financial ratios and things like that. And that's the kind of analysis we will expect. And then the company could also make a decision, you know something, I might be able to save some costs in terms of my operations, you know, how I'm able, my production processes, able to look at the capabilities that I have can be enhanced. So I actually start to look then at my competitors, which again links back to your 5 forces analysis. Or you can look at your CPM, where you did your competitive analysis, and the company might determine I might need to make a decision to horizontally integrate to enhance my operational processes. And as you said earlier, because I want to get some new competencies to enhance my operations, or even new technologies that the company might have following the resource-based view. So remember those key concepts that you need to know very well. You know, the issue of the structure of value chain, but more so the importance of strategic cost analysis, your cost drivers, cost advantages, and cost disadvantages. And So what is the purpose of doing the strategic cost analysis? What do you really want to find out when you do the strategic cost analysis? What do you really want to find out? Right. So what do you want to find out that? Why is it important to look at this unit cost? Right, it would help you to do the cost advantages and cost disadvantages per unit. Right, remember I said earlier, when you talk about buying supplies, you're buying multiple supplies at one time. It's just not one supply. So you can't assume my overall costs are high. How can an overall cost help a manager in decision making? Right? From an accounting perspective, it helps you determine whether you have high costs, impacting on your profitability. But from a functional and operational perspective, overall cost can't help you in decision making, and that's why the unit by unit cost helps you then, that you're able then to do what when you look at the unit by unit cost instead of overall cost. Yes, you're comparing with your competitor, but what ultimately you want to be able to do? When you finish the unit by unit analysis. Sorry? Well, that's the general purpose. But what is the specific thing I want to do when I do this unit by unit analysis? Sorry? Make the about. Right, you're correct. But I'm saying what you want to be able to identify specifically if there's a particular area that has exorbitant costs compared to your competitor. In other words, you might be buying 500 different units of supplies every month, but it might just be two critical things that are driving your costs up. They're very expensive and they're out of control. But the majority of your costs could be under control, but just two or three items could be the things that are really pushing your costs out of operation. So that's why you do the unit by unit analysis to zero in on the specific cost drivers that might be pushing your costs out of control. You understand? So it might not that you have bad cost control procedures. Generally, you might have good cost control procedures, but there might be just one or two areas of weakness that might cost you a lot of money. Right? So for example, you might have a company that has excellent management and leadership, but there might be just one area of weakness, security. Your security is so weak that at the end of the month, so much things are being stolen and expensive things. So it's nothing to do with the management of business in terms of HR and accounting and production processes. It is just that security is so lax that people are just stealing stuff. When you do your inventory of stock take, you realize, oh my gosh, about 40% of stock has gone missing. You see the point I'm making, right? So you need to zero in on what things are really one or two things possibly that could be driving costs out of control, right? So as I said, I'm hoping that the majority of students here at this point have a clear understanding, at least the ones who were participating have an idea, been speaking about it. But at this stage, you really need to know this concept of value chain analysis pretty well. And then competitive and corporate strategies. So for these, you need to know all of these. Right? You need to know all of these. And the defensive strategies and offensive strategies. So we touched on the integration strategies before. So you know you have backward, horizontal, and forward integration. The text calls them what kind of strategies? Vertical integration strategies. And then you have your intensive strategies, which are market penetration, market development, and product development. Right? And again, you need to know those strategies. Difference between market development and market penetration. We went through that many times. So let me test somebody and say, my lady friend here, hi, how are you? What's the difference between, that's looking back, yes? What's the difference between market penetration and market development? Yes. What's the difference between market penetration and market development? Right. Well, you're generally correct. So there's one thing that distinguishes the two. Then when you say develop the market, develop it where? For development, develop it where? Right, right, outside of your geographical space, and that's the key thing. It has to be outside of your geographic space, and in penetration, you're trying to really either take control or expand your reach or market share within a particular existing market. And then you have Porter's 5 generic competitive strategies, which are cost leadership, focus, and differentiation. But we said 5. So it's cost leadership, low cost, best value, and focus, low cost, best value. How do you distinguish, Justin, between low cost and best value? Quality. All right, he's generally correct, but there's something I would add to it. He said low cost is just keeping your cost down, whereas the lowest, whereas the best value looks at quality in relation to price. Anybody want to add? There's a little distinction I would make. Yeah, but there's something. Yes, and that's the thing that you miss is the comparison relative to your competitors for best value, right? It's relative to the competitors, right? So wherever they are, you're trying to be a little better than them. But whereas low cost is just the absolute lowest cost, where you're just trying to push costs down in the greatest possible ways. Find all ways to keep costs absolutely down. That's low cost. But the best value is focusing on quality, but relative to your competitors, that wherever they are, you're going to be a little below your competitors. Right? That's the difference. And the same thing applies for the focus strategy. And remember, as I said, don't get price and costs mixed up in the exam. Right? A lot of students get cost and price mixed up. Right? So can you tell me the difference, cost and price? Cost is, right, your cost is what it takes to produce your good or service, where the price is what customers pay for the service. So when we talk about cost leadership, it is talking about the cost of production, which would eventually influence the price. The two are really what we call a symbiotic relationship. They are tied. So cost influences whatever price you eventually would get. So as the cost go up, it would impact on your price, and as the price go down, as the cost go down, influence on your price, except there's a condition under which that doesn't apply. What condition is that? About the pricing and cost. What condition it does not apply in? Ever heard the term elastic and inelastic? So there are conditions where cost could be going up, cost coming down, and it does not necessarily impact on price. Under what conditions could that happen? Yes? Huh? It could be, well, if we use that term loosely, necessity. Not only necessity, but monopoly. You see, a monopoly is stronger than necessity. And monopoly or scarcity means you have to come to me to get it. So whether my costs are rising or decreasing, whatever price I charge you, you got to pay. You understand? So there are conditions under which your costs rising or lowering. Right? And you know the conditions under which then costs would impact on price is in what type of situation? Where cost is significant in how you can price your products. Under what conditions? Sorry? But what kind of market conditions would exist for that? That's it. In a very highly competitive environment, you have to look at your costs because there's so many other players charging so many different prices and trying to, well, not so many different prices, the margins are going to be small. So for you to be able to move in price, it's going to be very, very difficult. So in those situations in real life, when you have very highly in competitive markets, what kind of pricing variations do you see? In highly competitive markets, in a real practical sense, what kind of pricing differentials would you see in those highly competitive markets? That's it. $5.99, $5.95, $5.96. We sell it, somebody sells the drink at $4.95, but you can get it at Popular for $4.80. Yeah? And then Super Center selling at $4.85. So when it's amazing when you see these prices, $3.99, and we sell it at $3.95. Right? But when you're selling hundreds of thousands of units, 2 cents can make a big, big difference. Right? And it happens all over the world. You travel to the US, you always see, and I always wonder, $4.99. But again, when you multiply cents by millions, you see, so some people say it's only a cent, but when you're selling millions of units, a cent adds up to substantial money every month. Right? So that's the point I'm making. When margins are very narrow, people then compete for cents. Right? So if you can reduce your cost X amount, you might be able to reduce the price to customers by 2 cents, by 5 cents, which in a very highly competitive market where volume is important is substantial. Focus strategies, another name for that is a niche strategy, this unique small group that can really control price. And defensive strategies, what are some of the defensive strategies? Liquidation, retrenchment, and divestiture. How does divestiture differ from liquidation? Good morning, madam, how are you? How do you distinguish divestiture from liquidation? Right. Liquidation, you're shutting down everything. Divestiture, you're just shutting down one arm. Okay. And then the offensive strategies, acquisition. I'm taking over bullion tactics. Right. What do they call them now? I forgot. Hostile takeover. You go on the markets and you bid higher, get the majority of shares, or you take control of a business. And this would generally occur in stock exchanges where you have public companies. You surely would not be able to do that with a private company. But normally on stock exchanges, you can have a hostile takeover, merging and things like that. And then we have these matrices, the grand strategy, IE matrix, space matrix. Right, so what we'll do is just take a break, drink a little water, and then we come back and look at these matrices and the importance of these matrices. We really need to know how to analyze these matrices well and then look at implementation as a separate concept. So we will just take a pause and come back.